Think you know ancient Rome and Greece? Think of legions, philosophers, gladiator battles. But there is another story, one that's almost never told. It's not carved in marble or celebrated in epic poems. It's a story hidden behind the walls of homes, written in the daily grit and incredible cunning of half the population. The women. A story of survival under laws and social rules that, to us today, seem absolutely unimaginable. This is the raw truth that didn't make it into the history books. Picture this. To get a divorce, a woman didn't need lawyers or courts. All she had to do was leave her house for just 3 nights. And just like that, the marriage was over. And what did she use during her period? Not a quick trip to the pharmacy. She relied on makeshift solutions, bits of cloth, sheep's wool, rags, that she had to wash and reuse again and again. Or where did she go to socialize to hear the latest gossip since she couldn't just hang out in the forum? The answer might surprise you: the public baths. That was her social network, but it was also a perfect place to catch a deadly disease. Did you know a woman might not even have her own name? She was often just called the daughter of so-and-so, and that even after marriage, the most powerful man in her life could remain not her husband, but her father. This is the real ancient world through a woman's eyes. Today, we're pulling back the curtain. 10 harsh, shocking, and utterly fascinating facts about what life was really like. Strap in. It's a journey into a reality you've never imagined. Let's start with the foundation of her existence: work. A woman's life was defined by relentless labor, but the type of work was a brutal class divide. If she was born into a poor or common family, her body was a tool for survival from sunrise to sunset. She worked the fields, planted, harvested, tended to animals, fetched water, and ground grain. In the city, her options were slightly more varied but no less tough. She could become a midwife, a wet nurse, a hairdresser, a seamstress, a waitress, a cook, or an entertainer, a dancer or a juggler performing in taverns. For these women, there was a certain hard-won freedom of movement. They could navigate the streets, go to markets, interact with the world. But this freedom was bought with exhausting, often poorly paid physical labor. Now, flip the script. A woman born into the elite class lived a life of extreme privilege and extreme confinement. Her world was not the city, but the interior of her family's villa. And inside those walls, she wasn't lounging. She was the CEO. Her job was management on a massive scale, running a complex household, overseeing an army of slaves, cooks, cleaners, tutors, weavers. She managed the budget, planned elaborate social dinners crucial for her family's status, safeguarded the family's wealth, and supervised the children's early education. Her authority within the home was significant, but her physical freedom was almost zero. Stepping outside without a valid, approved reason and a full escort was socially unacceptable. She was the ruler of a gilded cage. Now, let's talk about one of the most private and universal challenges: menstruation. In a world without any modern conveniences, women had to be endlessly resourceful. Historical evidence points to one clear solution: reusability. They used what was available and absorbent: soft, washed wool, linen rags, or even moss. These materials were carefully folded, used, and then meticulously cleaned, often with water and natron, a natural salt, to be used again in the next cycle. It was a private, repetitive chore. But there's also intriguing evidence that some women, perhaps those who needed to be more active, used a subligaculum, a form of fitted leather underwear that could hold these absorbent materials securely in place. Imagine that. No disposables, no privacy of a pharmacy shelf. Just practical, personal ingenuity. Marriage was the central event of a woman's life, and it came shockingly early. Girls, especially from aristocratic families, were often married as soon as they reached puberty. Sometimes as young as 12. The decision was never ever hers. It rested solely with the paterfamilias, the eldest living male in her family, who held the legal power of life and death over his household. Marriages were alliances, business deals, political tools. A daughter's feelings were irrelevant. In theory, she could refuse a match, but only under the nearly impossible condition of proving the groom had a bad moral character. For most, resistance was not an option. But here's where Roman law serves up one of history's most fascinating loopholes: the 3-day divorce. One common form of marriage was usus, marriage by continuous cohabitation or habit. The rule was simple. If a woman lived with a man as his wife for 1 full year without a break, she automatically became his legal wife. But this law contained a breathtaking piece of potential female agency. To prevent this marriage from becoming official, or to effectively end a marriage formed this way, the woman had to do one thing: leave. She had to be absent from the marital home for 3 consecutive nights. That's it. No court filings, no need to prove adultery or cruelty. By simply staying with her birth family or friends for 3 nights, she could reset the clock or sever the bond entirely. In a society where women had minimal legal power, this was a stark, simple, and powerful tool for self-determination. So where did she go during those 3 days, or on any ordinary day, to be a person, not just a wife or daughter? For many Roman women, the answer was the public baths, the thermae. But these were far more than bathing facilities. They were the social hub of the ancient world, especially for women who were excluded from the political and commercial spaces of the forum. The baths were where she went to meet friends, exchange the latest news and gossip, listen to poets or musicians, and, as historical sources hint, sometimes arrange discreet romantic meetings. However, and this is the critical, gritty detail, this social paradise was also a petri dish. The warm, steamy, communal water was a perfect breeding ground for bacteria, skin infections, and parasites. Rome had advanced aqueducts, but the concept of germs was millennia away. Every social visit was a calculated risk, the vital human need for connection versus a very real threat to her health. And here's another legal twist that shatters modern assumptions. Even after marriage, a woman's legal identity often remained tied to her father. In a common form of marriage known as sine manu, without hand, the woman did not fall under the legal authority of her husband. She remained under the potestas, the absolute power of her own father. Her husband had no direct legal control over her person. Crucially, she kept her birth family name. Her primary loyalty was legally and socially expected to be to her father's household, not her husband's. This could create incredible daily tension. She was essentially a permanent diplomat of her birth family's interests, living in her husband's home. Her father could even demand she leave her husband if it served his family's needs. Imagine that dynamic at the dinner table. Once she became a mother, the experience for an elite woman was again detached. It was not customary. It was often seen as unseemly for a noble woman to breastfeed her own children. Immediately after birth, the newborn was handed to a wet nurse, almost always a slave or a hired servant from the lower classes. Why? Influential medical writers like Soranus argued that childbirth was so exhausting it could spoil the quality of the mother's milk, making it unsuitable. There was also a curious belief in transmission through milk. Hiring a Greek wet nurse, for example, was seen as giving the child a head start, as she could pass on the Greek language and a refined, cultured temperament through her milk. For an aristocratic mother, her role was to produce a legitimate heir, not necessarily to nurture it physically. The pursuit of beauty was another realm of extreme and, frankly, shocking effort. The ideal was pale, smooth, hairless skin. To achieve it, women used concoctions that sound like a horror movie recipe. Everyday treatments included masks made with lanolin, grease from sheep's wool, notorious for its strong, unpleasant odor. They used creams of donkey milk, believed to soften the skin, pastes of crushed oyster shells for exfoliation, and kohl to line their eyes. But the extremes are what truly astonish. For serious whitening, aristocratic recipes called for masks made from crocodile dung or ash from burnt snails. They even used toxic lead-based powders for that pale look. And if teeth were lost, they might wear artificial ones carved from ivory. The process was elaborate, often smelly, sometimes poisonous, and yet it was a non-negotiable social requirement to maintain status and attract a husband. Finally, consider the most basic marker of identity: a name. For most of Roman history, women did not receive unique personal names. A daughter was simply given the feminine form of her father's clan name. The daughter of a man named Cornelius was Cornelia. If he had 2 daughters, they were Cornelia Major and Cornelia Minor, Cornelia the elder and Cornelia the younger. She might later be identified by her father's first name, like Vipsania, daughter of Vipsanius. She was an extension of her father's identity. Only much later did some women acquire a second name, perhaps indicating a birthplace, but true individual naming was a luxury of a later age. And let's be clear about the famous liberal sexual morals of Rome. They were a freedom for men and a strict set of rules for women. A Roman man could have mistresses, concubines, and lovers with relative social impunity. Poetry celebrated these passions. For a married woman, however, infidelity was a catastrophic social crime. It was deemed profoundly inappropriate and could bring ruinous shame upon her entire family, destroying its honor. During certain periods, like under Emperor Augustus's moral laws, adultery was even a public crime, punishable by exile or worse. The celebrated sexual freedom of antiquity was, in practice, a one-way street. So, what's the final picture? The life of a woman in ancient Rome and Greece was a masterclass in navigating a world of profound constraints. It was a life of hard boundaries, but also of quiet, stunning ingenuity within those boundaries. It was a world where crocodile dung was a beauty product. 3 days of absence could break a marriage, and a public bath was the riskiest and only social network in town. Her story isn't one of pitched battles, but of a million small daily acts of resilience. It's a narrative not etched in triumphal marble arches, but in the worn patterns of washed cloth, the calculated risk of a bathhouse visit, and the clever use of a legal loophole. If this hidden, gritty side of history fascinates you, if it makes you see the past in a new light, then do us a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. It's the single best way to tell us this deep dive content is valuable and you want more. Now, I'm curious. Which fact shocked you the most? Was it the 3-day divorce, the beauty masks from crocodile waste, or the fact that a father's power trumped a husband's? Drop your answer in the comments below. The discussion is half the fun. And if you don't want to miss our next journey into the untold corners of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We uncover the stories that textbooks leave out,